Alright, so last week, as you saw, we tore out all the carpeting and laminate flooring, and we thought, as it's a new year, we need a new floor. Alright, so before we start the first row of flooring, it's key to measure the distance. If we're laying the floor this way, you want to measure this distance going, perpendicular to your length of flooring, because you need to know if you start with a full row over here and then you get to over here and then you have like a ½ inch of a gap left, that it's not technically good. It's not good to cut a piece of flooring that thin because it's probably not going to stay down. So what you want to do is you want to measure your full length, and then if you have, so here, I'll just give you our numbers. We measured and we had 155.75 all the way across. Then we took out ½ inch over here because that's where it's going to meet up with tile, and we have a T-molding, and that bracket that we screw into the floor is ½ inch. So subtract a ½ inch for that, and then we're going to shim this side by a ¼ inch, so minus 0.25. Brings you to 155 even. Then the width of the flooring itself, now don't measure in with the snapping mechanism or the locking mechanism, just measure the piece of flooring that's going to be showing visibly from the top. And in our case, that's 5 3/4 inch. So 155 minus 5.7, or sorry, not minus, divided by 5.75 comes out to 26.95, which honestly is perfect. Meaning we're gonna have, starting from over here, we're gonna have 26 rows, and then the last row will be 95% of a board. So basically we're gonna shave off maybe a ¼ inch, but we're basically gonna have a almost full board over there. So that's perfect, we don't need to make any adjustments. All right, everybody, so we made it this far. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows through here. We do have to continue into the family room, but we got like a good chunk done. And this is honestly the hardest part, is getting it to a big enough chunk where it's gonna be able to kind of stay still on its own without too much weight on it. The first couple of rows are obviously the most challenging because all the boards want to move around as you're tapping them in together. So that's what we lined up these boxes here as a weight on the first row, so that as we tapped in the following rows, they wouldn't move as much. And you just gotta be careful not to tap them too hard. And now we're at a point where I think we're okay, but we'll just leave these boxes here and then we can just access them as we need new boards, so we have to keep moving boxes around. We're just about ready to lay the next sheet of underlayment right here. That's why I have this is the white underlayment part that you can stick the next sheet to, so there's a nice seal. And just to be transparent, we actually got about maybe 3 or 4 rows in, realized that the seams weren't perfect. They were going together. From a distance it looked fine, but up close, the seams weren't closed. There's a few gaps here and there, and specifically some of the seams were closed at one end and open at the other, meaning that the entire row is kind of off kilter, not centered. And you can try and fix that by pulling one part of the board and not pulling the other, but as you do that you end up causing more mistakes and it just becomes a huge mess. And so we made the tough decision, but kind of had to be done, to literally we tore out all the boards we had just laid. We probably put in at least 2 hours worth of time, maybe 3, of laying boards. We pulled all those out, and then I started from scratch down at that corner. But honestly, to go from nothing to what we are now, it only took about an hour. So it was worth, it sucked to tear it out, but it was worth doing to get it done right, because when you lay floor, the first section you lay will kind of carry through the rest of the floor. If you screw up here, it's going to just compound, and all of your errors will compound over time. And by the time you get to the other side of the room, you're going to run into some issues. So it's better to fix it from the start. So now we're at the point where we have it pretty good, and now it should go relatively smoothly. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, although this is vinyl, but you get the point. So let's get cracking. So now they laid it out, and there's just a little piece of tape on the underside of this that we're gonna pull off, and then that tape will stick to this white layer, combining these two so that there's still a moisture barrier, there's not a gap in between. So we'll just work our way down. We just made sure that there's no overlapping of the blue. There's a little bit of a gap, but it's better to have a little bit of a gap than any overlap because that'll cause a bump in your cord. All right guys, so I just wanted to show you the level of detail that you need when laying this floor. So just to give you some context, this is what we're looking at. I'm just laying this. This is the next board I'm laying. This is all other boards I've laid. But let's zoom in here. And you can see right in the middle of the screen, you know, it looks like it's closed, maybe from the zoomed out position, but it's not. And so I'm gonna tap this together and show you that even though it looks close from a distance, you really have to go up close and check out exactly what you're looking at. So it's kind of off screen, but I have this block here and this mount. I'm tapping it in from this side and you'll see it close here. Ready? Just like that. So you can see it's pretty satisfying to watch, but you can literally not see a seam whatsoever. So like that's what, with this flooring, you shouldn't really be able to see any sort of seam here. You should close it all the way, and that's when you know you're laying the floor right. So it's a nice little detail to keep an eye on.
So here you can see Grant's cutting away the underlayment where all the floor vents are, so you can allow the hot and cool air to come through.
All right, once this piece goes in, we will have officially completed one full row from this end of the house to the entryway. So it's a big moment. Hope it fits. Looks good. Nice. So that's where we just laid it. It's all the way down there. So now I'm just gonna fill in basically this little corner, and then we can work on this staircase going down that way, and it's really quick when you get these big boards going. It's just all the little cuts, you know, in this area that take the time, honestly. Let's get cracking. All right, so we're laying out the next couple starting boards for these next rows, and it's better to just batch them out. So we're gonna lay 3 of them in a row. One, batching them out is easier because you can just take them all to the miter saw and cut them right away. And 2 is that when you lay these out like this, you can see where each seam is for each row and kind of lay it out to your liking. So it's hard to see on camera, but right here there is a seam, and then there's a seam here in this row and a seam here in this row. So this was basically a full board. So now in this one, we want it obviously not to be a full board. And the trick here is when laying these out is, I don't know if you can tell, but the locking mechanism is actually, rather than normally it's on this side, I flip the board around, it's on this side. So when I install it, it will go like this. However, when I'm measuring it to determine my distance off the wall, you want to flip it around because you're measuring this distance here, not this distance. It's hard to describe, but if you were to lay it for yourself, you would understand that you do want to flip it around to measure. So for this next board, I picked right here to make my mark. So it's far enough off this seam. For my next row, I'm gonna put it here. You just wanna make sure that the minimum distance for the start of a row is 12 inches. Just so that if the board's too small, it might pop out or it might not get a perfect lock, or there might not be enough inches on the lock for it to hold in place properly. So just try and do 12 inches at least here. And then this next row, I'm gonna make it long over here. And the 4th row, 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll just go back to a full length board, and that way you don't have to make a cut for every single board. You can use your full length boards every once in a while. I try and make it a minimum of 3 boards in between each full length board so that the seams don't line up like right next to each other. If you were to look this way, like perpendicular to the way the flooring is laid, you don't want to see a bunch of seams right in line with each other, otherwise it kind of looks bad. Actually, some people do that as a look. They'll do like one board full, the next board half, the next board full, and it'll be like a staggered, almost like a brick pattern. But to me, personal preference, to me that does not look good. With a wood floor, you want to make it look natural and organic. So I like to just pick arbitrary lengths and make it look as randomized as possible. So anyway, we'll cut these, install it, and then you can just keep going down the row. Okay, so we're measuring out this board here. We don't have to cut much off. We're gonna have to cut out like a little, U section. So what I do is I take my board, I line it up down here, and I get it as close to where I need to go as possible. Okay, and you wanna make sure it's relatively straight. And so now I'm just gonna mark the edges of this thing that I'm cutting around, which is just basically a bump out of a wall. Mark that. Then I'm gonna line it up here as if I'm about to lay the board in. So I have it basically flush. It's like a little gap, but basically flush. And then rather than marking this, which is going to be showing, don't mark it, take a measuring tape and then measure off of this edge to this edge. So in my case, it's basically 1 inch on the dot. So then take this back out. Hopefully you can see my marks here and here. And then I'm gonna use a speed square to connect all this, but just so I have a reference point, I'm gonna mark a dot at the 1 inch line. And so this is what I'll be cutting out, which I usually just mark with X's so I don't get screwed up. But I'm gonna connect these lines with a square, speed square, cut it out with a jigsaw. You can cut these boards with basically any woodworking tools. They cut really easily. So I'm gonna go cut this out and then we'll install it and get moving on. All right, and just like that, we're back. We have the cut board. And now hopefully, I honestly haven't tested it, so we're gonna see if this fits. Now the tricky part is, in order to put the floor in, you kind of have to go on an angle. So we're gonna have to kind of go up and around this. I might not have cut enough of the tolerance, but we'll see. I guess we'll start up high like so. Slide it into position. Look at that. Oh, I honestly didn't test this. This is the first time. Wow, look at that. It just fell right over top. That's how you cut a board. Wow. Perfect. So you can see there's a gap right here, but we still have yet to put on the shoe molding, so it'll get covered up, but from these sides it'll look clean. The old laminate floor had some T-molding that we needed to take out, and this was a strip that was nailed in, so we had to use some elbow grease to get this one out. Alright, so now we are in the entryway, and as you can see, we left a gap here between the tile, which is where the front door is, and then the start of the vinyl. And this is where we're gonna put our T-molding track. All right, so I'm just filling in this last piece here with the T-mold, and I want to get a very accurate measurement because I want it to be flush here and flush here. So rather than using the Sharpie like I have been, that's kind of a thick line, I taped it off, and then I'm going to use a pen so I can get the exact measurement, and the tape just helps see the line. I can see the line on top of the wood, but also the tape will help with chip out so that when I cut it, it won't, the material won't chip out everywhere, and it'll look still like a nice clean cut. So we'll just line this up here, butt it up against this, and then mark where we want it. And go cut it. So we just cut our piece, and then you can see right here, that's the line I cut, and it's like perfect. There's not any chip out or anything, so the tape helped there. After laying 500 square feet of our flooring, we ended up buying 6 of these, so there were 600 square feet that we bought, but we only had this many scraps left after installing the last piece, which comes out to maybe 2 or 3 square feet. And these come in 100 square foot sections, so like, we nearly had to cut into this, but now we're able to return it for 50 bucks, so normally you're not this lucky every time, but we got pretty lucky this time. Organic.
I was gonna say organic.
That was good usage of the word organic.
All right, let's go.
Back to work.